Testing 1, 2. I don't see Joan. Is't thou ready? Good morning, hearty people. All my fellow Vikings, yes. Thank you for being here this morning. I know that it may have been an effort for you to dig yourselves out and find your way here, and I'm so glad that you are. I'm so glad to see some new faces. And for all of you who are joining us online from the comfort of your own homes, welcome. We're now going to settle into a spirit of worship with a moment of quiet to be followed by hymn by Ralph Zermil, played by our music director and pianist, Matthew Johnson. You're also invited to light a silent candle of joy or sorrow at this time. We light our chalice this morning in honor of the teachers who remind us that awakening is not a distant mountaintop, but a practice of coming home to our breath. Let's do that for a moment, shall we? Just allow yourselves to breathe. And to our bodies. Feel your body. To our histories. To one another. We kindle this flame for teachers who show us that liberation is braided from truth-telling, from tenderness, from the courage to sit with what is hard and still choose compassion. May this light reveal the places within us that long to be free, and the places in our world still waiting for justice. May it steady us as we learn to meet suffering without fear, joy without apology, and community without leaving anyone behind. Let this flame be our reminder the path of awakening is wide. The work of liberation is shared, and we walk it breath by breath together. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester, a congregation of love, hope, and justice, inspiring people to take on the challenges of a changing world. My name is Payson, and I'm honored to be one of the ministers of this congregation. We begin by acknowledging that here in Worcester, Massachusetts, we work, learn, live, and worship on the seized ancestral homeland of the Nipmuc people who thrive and remain active as the Nipmuc tribe. If you would like to learn more about the Nipmuc community, please see one of the brochures we have in our foyer. We offer special welcome to those of you who are new or who are visiting with us for the first time this morning. We hope that you'll join us in Fellowship Hall following this service for refreshments and conversation. If you have questions about this service or desire more information about any of the ministries or programs of this congregation, please do not hesitate to ask. We invite you to fill out one of the cards found in the pews. These cards can be placed in the offering plate or given to one of the ushers and greeters this morning. For those of you who are joining us online, we offer you a very special welcome for safety purposes and so that we might come to know you better. As you are able, please do put your name on your video feed. Please take a moment to sign one of the attendance clipboards that are making their way around. Though you're not obligated to sign, we appreciate your information and use it only for church purposes. During the service, we offer an opportunity to share a brief personal joy or sorrow. If you'd like to have yours read aloud by me, please print it on one of the index cards in the pew and drop it in the collection plate when it comes around, or bring it forward during this time in the service. These cards will be posted outside my office to be shared with our friends at other services. For those online, I invite you to place a joy or a sorrow in the chat, and we will be certain to share it during this important part of our service as well. In the foyer, there are listening devices, large print service programs, hymnals, for those who may find their assistance beneficial. I also remember that there are seat cushions for those of you who need it. You know who you are. And I think that we're going to have to talk to the connections team about getting a stockpile of hand warmers and feet warmers and things like that, because it's just that point in the season, right? I invite you now to turn your technology to worship mode. Please note the announcements on the back of your order of service. There'll be time for short verbal announcements following the postlude. I would just simply remind you that this evening, those of you who are fans of the Patriots are welcome to join us in the lounge for our Super Bowl party. We will also invite those who are fans of the ocean pigeons, otherwise known as the Seahawks, to join us as well. They are welcome. We are a barrier-free congregation, and we invite you to enjoy the evening with us. And it has been warm in here all weekend. I intend to make it that way this evening as well. If you want to bring something to share in the form of a snack or a goodie, we'll provide the non-alcoholic beverages. You can bring your own bottle if you so desire. And we hope to see as many of you as want to come and join together as possible. We're glad that you're here, safe. We're glad that it's warm in this place. After last week, you should have seen the texts that came in early this morning. There is heat, isn't there? I wanted to just say, come and find out, but I didn't do that. I hope that you'll take this as an opportunity for rest, for reflection, and rejuvenation.
Good morning. I am Joan McGinn, and I bring a joy, good news this morning, which our country sorely needs. In these dark days, the good news is that there's a group of 20 inspiring Buddhist monks, along with their peace dog, Aloka, on a 2,300-mile trek known as the Walk for Peace, which many of you already know about. The purpose of their walk is to promote healing, unity, compassion, and action in response to our country's turmoil, as well as the bruised and hurting global world. Likewise, they want to spread information about the need for meditation and loving kindness. Finally, their trek across these 8 southern states will be complete on this Tuesday, February 10th, in Washington, D.C. There, and Aaron will tell us more about that, they will petition our government to make Buddha's birthday a national holiday. Good luck. But I have hope. These brave, relentless monks walk barefoot on frozen ground in freezing temperatures in their saffron robes. Starting in Texas on back roads, they began to attract first a trickle of followers who would walk alongside them. But little by little, their solemn procession, their radiant presence, and peaceful message has caught on like wildfire. By the time they reached Columbia, South Carolina, these humble Buddhist monks attracted a stadium of 20,000 followers. 20,000. And this is in Columbia, South Carolina, hardly a bastion of liberal experience. These monks will try to meet with legislators in Washington starting Tuesday, and perhaps Trump himself. For 2 days in Washington, this Tuesday to Thursday, they will chant, do rituals, and offer blessings to all who come by them. So stay tuned. We'll see if it gets reported in the media. Anyway, this is a quote by one of these monks. In the moment. The leader of the monks on the Walk for Peace is Venerable Vietnamese monk Bhikkhu Panakara, a monk who said this about his thousands of reverent followers. Quote, "Everybody is here in the moment." Very Zen. Our walking itself cannot create peace. But when someone encounters us, when our message touches something deep within them, when it awakens the peace that has always lived quietly in their own heart, something sacred begins to unfold. Unquote. When these monks arrive in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, they will be met by thousands of their followers. And as I said, I hope the media covers them. Let's pray a fervent prayer that these monks, as they meet with legislators and perhaps Trump in Washington, that these people's hearts will be touched by light, awareness, awakening, and unfolding by the presence and peaceful messages of these sacred monks, especially in our unrepentant, unbelievably racist president. May it be so. Namaste and blessed be. I lit a candle earlier for their safe passage for our country and for the world as a whole. Thank you. Blessed be. Sorry, I had to deviate a bit.
To join together in our opening hymn this morning, number 156, found in your gray hymnals. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to a God and be free. No more mourning, no more mourning, no more mourning over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. They'll be singing, they'll be singing, they'll be singing over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. Please be seated. I want to invite our basket bearers forward at this time. Those participants in our religious exploration program who arrive each time we worship with baskets of change for change. If you have change that you would like to contribute, this is the ongoing effort by our youth and children to support the emergency fund of this congregation. Please raise your hand if you have change, and one of our bearers will find you. Thank you so much. And thank you. Thus I have heard. One time the Buddha was staying at the city of Kisangara, the birthplace. Oh, eighth principle. Oops. Come forward. Oh, no. I understand that Professor Merrill has forthrightly taken the spot. This way. This is what I get for not looking at the order of service before I speak.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Debbie Merrill, and I'm a professor of sociology at Clark University. My eighth principal moment occurred at my university. In the spring of 2022, I applied for a year-long course for faculty. We often have short workshops for a couple of hours, but there had never been a year-long course for faculty members around teaching. So I was really excited, and I applied for the course. It was called an Anti-Racism Pedagogy or Teaching Practicum. So the goal was to try to teach faculty how to teach in a non-racist manner. It was a 2-semester commitment, which included, first of all, learning how your own prior teaching was racist, and then applying what you had learned in one of your actual courses the following semester. So you had to be willing to experiment with the course the next semester. This was 2 years after the murder of George Floyd and was at the height of anti-racism at the university. A significant contingent of students was demanding that Clark take measures to end racism in all parts of the curriculum and across the campus. The course itself took place over 2 semesters. In the first half, we did 2 things. We read what it means to teach in an anti-racist manner and then planned how we were going to change the course we had identified earlier to be anti-racist, and how we would research, because we're all researchers, whether or not those changes had made a difference. What the leaders of the praxis were telling us was that anti-racist teaching required decentering yourself, or decentering your position as an authority figure in your field or in your course, and making learning a joint effort of faculty members and students. I had a lot of trouble, I'll be honest, I had a lot of trouble with this idea because I felt that was why the university was paying me, that I should be more learned in my field than my students, and I'd like to be in control of the classroom, to be honest. What I learned, though, is that anti-racism or anti-racist teaching is really about creating equity for students who feel marginalized in the classroom, and I'll explain what led me to that. So my journey then became how to build that equity. I did decenter myself a bit. I learned how to let the students decide what they wanted to talk about regarding the reading, rather than my long list of what I thought were the most important issues, and have their own discussions in small groups that I had no say over, or I had little say over. They also had the opportunity to use whatever means they felt was their strength to be evaluated on. So not just writing papers, but they could create podcasts, they could create works of art that would be the source of their evaluations. It was a big leap from the kind of teaching that I had been doing for 30 years. The way in which all of this became a central learning experience for me was that I realized that being anti-racist is not about being colorblind. I thought that I was not racist because I was colorblind, or that I thought I was colorblind. I realized, though, it's about creating equity, not equality. It's about providing resources and a safe space for people from marginalized backgrounds to have similar access to building success. I started to use my time in class not to make sure that every student heard what I had said, but that every student felt comfortable and encouraged to share their ideas and talk in their groups. So instead of being colorblind, I became color aware to make sure that everyone in class had an equitable shot at succeeding. I also learned the extent to which our racial stereotypes inform so much of what we believe about one another and how ingrained those stereotypes are. Yet they're often founded on nothing but blindly accepted myths. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone during coffee hour if you're interested in that. I also learned just how important it is when interacting with my students and one another to keep in mind not just what I'm saying, but how it's perceived by others. For example, I had been using the term Native Americans in my class, and I thought that was a perfectly non-racist term. And the students felt that that was racist, though. They prefer the term indigenous people. I didn't really see a big difference, but what I'd learned was that it was important to them. And the only way that I could get their, the only way that I could make them feel comfortable was if I used the terms that they were comfortable with. I hope that this has been somewhat helpful. What I intended for you to get out of this is that being colorblind isn't about is not anti-racist. It's just ignoring the problem of racism. Anti-racism is about creating equity, creating opportunities for everyone to have access to successful experiences and achieve their goals. So thank you for your attention this morning and the opportunity to talk to you, and stay warm.
Thus I have heard. One time the Buddha was staying at the city of Kusangara, the birthplace of the great worthy, on the shore of the Ajavarati River between a pair of sala trees. At the time, the world-honored one was accompanied by a great bhiksu congregation numbering 80 people encircling him front and back. On the 15th day of the second month, the time of his entry into nirvana was imminent. Using the Buddha's spiritual power, he issued a great voice that universally filled the minds of beings. Confirming to each species of beings, the voice addressed all the sentient beings. Today, it said, the Tathagata, the Arat, the perfectly enlightened one, feels compassion for sentient beings, protectively shelters the sentient beings, and regards sentient beings equally as he would his own son, Ra'ula. For the sake of those who have taken refuge and for the householders, the great awakened, world-honored one now wishes to enter nirvana. If any sentient being has uncertainties, they can now submit the very last questions to Tathagata. At that time, the world-honored one in the early morning issued from his facial orifices a variety of lights. The brilliance was of various colors. They were blue and yellow and red and white and rock crystal and agate. The light pervasively lit the cosmos of the Buddha's worlds, reaching out into all 10 corrections as well, and within throughout all of humanity. which precedes the next truth, that there are discernible causes for suffering and that these causes can be transformed and terminated, concluding with the way to transform and terminate the causes is through the path. This is from a mid-5th century account of the great nirvana of the Buddha, or what is often referred to in Buddhist tradition as his peri-nirvana, his final nirvana. What I think is often misunderstood about Buddhism by those who are unfamiliar with the tradition, who often conclude that attaining enlightenment, entering nirvana, which is the ultimate state of moving beyond the karmic cycle of suffering and release, is an event that happens at a moment in time. That the Buddha gained enlightenment, and there have been others who have accomplished the same, might lead us to conclude that this is a state of being that is the goal of the tradition. What's most often understood is as a state of being is probably better understood as a perpetual state of becoming. By this I mean that while enlightenment is a state of being, it is not in and of itself the goal of Buddhism. The goal in Buddhism, even or especially for those who are said to have attained enlightenment, is to be a vessel through which to accomplish the cessation of the suffering of all beings, as our mid-5th century text describes. In other words, enlightenment is a modality and the state of becoming of all beings toward the end of suffering itself is the goal. Think of what Joan described of our monks walking across the country. Right? And the quote from one of the monks saying, "Our walk doesn't end suffering." Right? The way that we impact people along the way is in service to the ending of suffering. It is an awakening that is perpetual and continues. This morning, this awareness is particularly informed by the work of Black Buddhist practitioners, sages, and teachers, which seems apropos this month as we honor and celebrate Black History Month. We do not often associate African American history with that of Buddhism. And yet, as the editors of the book Black and Buddhist note, Buddhism emerged from a caste-oriented culture in which a powerful man of color renounced his power, woke up to his delusions, grew in compassion, and committed himself to teaching a way of life for all to awaken. His teachings at their root were caste disorienting. In other words, Buddhism is a path to decaste or decolonialize one's mind while simultaneously helping oneself build resilience against trauma. To begin to understand the primary disorientation that the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama based on his teachings on, reflected in the Eightfold Path as the essence of the path, is the Four Noble Truths. To begin, as the book relates, the Buddha, having been born into a royal, upper-class, noble family, came to redefine nobility. To be of a ruling caste means you are conventionally speaking, considered noble, above and apart the ruling classes. But as the editors of the volume Black and Buddhist write, the formerly noble Buddha proclaimed that nobility is not about caste, but it is about how one lives one's life to awaken from ignorance, hate, and greed. It is not a state of being, it is a state of becoming. The editors of the volume write, nobility in the Buddhist sense means releasing ourselves from the social constructs that blind us to the truth, positioning ourselves to receive the truth, accept the truth, and learn to live equanimously with the truth. But what is right about this for African American activists engaged in anti-racism work, they ask? Africans were kidnapped, tortured, enslaved, and extracted from their families, neighbors, territories, countries, and continent, having countless lies violently imposed on them for 400 years. What were those lies? The lies included Africans are not human beings. Africans are on earth to serve Europeans. African slaves are 3/5 of a person. Africans can endure the pain and suffering of slavery. African women and men do not suffer dehumanization from being raped and abused by European men. Africans pollute Europeans. Europeans are more intelligent than Africans, and so on. The editors write, there were and are countless attempts to permanently traumatize our historical and intergenerationally transmitted narratives. African American nobility, as informed by the Buddhist perspective, means releasing ourselves from the racist social constructs that blind us to the truth of our humanity. Positioning ourselves to receive the truth of our humanity, accepting our humanity, and learning to live equanimously with the truth of our humanity in a society that still questions it. The repetition of this sentiment is intentional. They write, to be authentically African American aligns well with the Buddhist nobility project. Nobility in the Buddhist sense is synonymous with right as it relates to the path. To be right is to be noble. In anti-racism activism, noble, right, and skillful when it counters the effects of trauma. Now, many of you know the Eightfold Path in Buddhism to be right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. From this perspective, however, right view is concerned with how we understand phenomenon. Having experienced meditation and having grown up in the United States, write the editors, a Western country that celebrates dualism, the separation of things into parts. We understand right view can only be achieved through the mind of meditation. The meditated mind is less divided, experiences interconnection with phenomenon, is not engaged in hardening ego constructions, experiences the impermanence of perspectives and frames of perception, and is not clinging to or craving anything. Once again, modality, not end. Right intention, on the other hand, means cultivating a mind in such a way that when negative interactions arise, we note them through the mindfulness of the mind. And we use compassion meditation practices in right actions such as loving kindness and Tonglen, which is Tibetan for sending and receiving, to reverse the impulse to inflict harm. Clinging to negative intentions, even if we intend not to act on them, inflicts pain and suffering onto our consciousness. I want to just simply pause here and be mindful of my own tendency during this era to be filled with rage, and how much that rage actually betrays my intention to bring about peace. And I also want to be mindful that sometimes rage, for those who have experienced marginalization, is a quintessentially courageous act. Because for centuries, people have been told that their anger was illegitimate. And when you've been told your anger is illegitimate, the expression of that anger becomes an act of resistance. Unfortunately, for those of us who have lived in a privileged state, often experience that anger as an affront. And once again, this idea of mindfulness, to be aware of how we ourselves are acting and reacting in a situation, and letting go of the anxiety that is associated with what is this anger, and is it directed at me? How am I a part of this, and maybe how do I perpetuate it myself, become important parts of that meditation. The authors continued, why give oppression the satisfaction of enslaving our minds to the grip of suffering? I love that. Why give oppression the satisfaction of enslaving our minds the grip of suffering? Anti-racism activists, they note, need to speak the truth of our experiences without adding to our suffering. Practicing right speech, they note, helps. Now, right speech is a concept that many are familiar with. We know the power of words, the authors note, to either cause harm to people or to uplift them. Some words really wound us to the core, they note, especially negative words that get repeatedly hurled at us from insecure, unskillful, and abusive parents and parental figures, while we are individuating those early traumas that many have experienced. These insults from people who are positioned to nurture us adhere to our evolving sense of self and become part of the self-effacing narratives that we unconsciously and consciously carry into other relationships. But it's not just parents, is it? It's also peers, teachers. It can be strangers. It can be pastors. It can be any one of us who is unmindful of the way in which we impact each other, which I think actually Professor Merrill eloquently describes in sort of the awakening to teaching practices when we come to it thinking we're pretty enlightened, right? We do a pretty good job, and then realize how much is behind what we do that can be unconsciously communicated to those that we are sworn to serve and to reverence. And we all do it, right? Every single one of us. From the Buddhist perspective, right speech not only includes refraining from speech intending to harm oneself and others, but it also includes, and this is where I think I love this idea of a year-long course, is cultivating skills of speech that are nurturing, supportive, and inspiring, which is really what the role of equity is. Right? Those you've seen, I wish I could throw up this image, but the difference between equality and equity, you've seen this image, some of you? 3 people standing. Equality is they're all standing on the same platform, but the smallest, the shortest of the people still can't see over the fence, right? Whereas equity is giving the one who can't see over the fence a taller box to stand on so that they are equal in height in sight. That's equity. Right action, they continue for activists, to mean the difference between life and death. Amen? They're speaking here of their African American neighbors and activists and friends. When they write, when we are confronted by a police officer, we know that virtually any movement can result in the officer shooting us dead. This is one of the primary things that came into my awareness when my children were of driving age. In realizing that my large, gregarious, white, 6'2" son, who was probably more a threat in terms of his size and capacity than any of his friends, be they white, black, or brown, didn't have to remain conscious of that like his friends did. in helping him understand why it was important to listen to their fears and to help them understand that they had the capacity to be their best selves in whatever moment it was. It was an awakening to privilege. They continue, we're taught to be extra careful about our actions so as not to provoke the police to act violently. We've been taught not to run, not to grab anything, to keep our hands empty and in the air, not to talk back and to do exactly what we're told, even if the experience is degrading. To save ourselves. We've been taught to be extremely differential. The spectrum and the specter of trauma pervades our lives, they write. Still, some things have not changed. They note that this is a heartbreaking reality. But they also note it is not a reality in which we need to lose our minds and hearts. They point to meditation to increase awareness, slow down the internal aggression, to hasten the coming of empathy, promote our creativity and civility in the midst of being threatened, even in the midst of our activism. You know, I think about this in terms of the trauma-informed work that I and others do with those who experience the trauma of homelessness and the traumas that often lead to homelessness. And the difference that often happens between those who experience the either quirky or aggressive behavior of folks who are traumatized in a variety of ways as the thing that must be controlled, right? The behavior that must stop. And what I've learned over the years is to be able to experience another not from the standpoint of needing to control their behavior, but wanting to understand what is happening to them. Behavior as symptom, if you will. Behavior as clue, behavior as invitation to a deeper empathy for someone. The other morning, I witnessed two different things happening at 6 a.m. as we were getting people up, and they were going to be sent outside into the cold so that the space that they were in could be reset for a food pantry. And I watched the difference between those who were involved in the process of awakening people, who were walking around shaking people going, you need to get up, you need to get up. And those of us that were standing around with garbage bags who were inviting people to place their blankets in those bags, who had a tendency to look everyone in the eye and simply go, good morning. And the different kind of response in those moments that can make a hell of a difference. And I want you to think about this in terms of your everyday interactions, right? How many of you make your way regularly through a Dunkin' Donuts line? Oh, you liars. All right, how many of you make your way through a Starbucks line? Right? No hands. You cannot lie to me, okay? I know who you are, right? How many of you occasionally make your way through such a line? Yeah, see, look at all those hands. Occasionally, someday I want to preach on the difference between occasionally and regularly and see just how close the line is, right? There you go. How many of you greet the server? How many of you smile and say thank you? Right? How many of you pay for the coffee and whatever has been ordered for the car behind you? Occasionally, right? See, I think there's something miraculous about, I'm using this as a very mundane action, right? Something that many of us regularly do, okay? But as a practice, right, of being mindful that there is someone who is standing in front of a window with sub-zero degree air flowing in their face to give me coffee. Right? And to think in that moment that the most important thing that can happen is for me to express tremendous gratitude. Right? But it's not just in the line at Dunkin' Donuts, right? It's the line at the grocery store, right? It's in the person you pass on the street. It is your capacity to reflect the integrity of your interest in another person's well-being that can be the onset to them awakening to their own sense of well-being. It's also your ability to sit with people in their worst possible moments, in their worst possible attitudes, without having to change them. And be able to respond in that moment by simply saying, I hear you, and this is what I hear. Because understanding, right? Understanding someone is far more powerful than agreeing with them. I can have honest disagreements with people and people who carry very different perspectives on the world. And yet, if I'm able to communicate to them that I understand, I think, where they're coming from and what has motivated them, we can actually have a conversation. But the moment I think I understand or I disregard that particular way of coming to an understanding of the world, puts everyone on defensive. So part of what this means in terms of right action is the ability to exude a kind of integrity of being that reflects the integrity of one's self, but also reflects the integrity inherent in the others who are part of whatever's going on. And I think that is the hardest thing to do today in a country that is so deeply divided. People ask me all the time, how do you have relationships with people who fundamentally disagree with you? I said, well, begin with the fact that they're a human being and go from there. Right? Don't ever lose sight of the fact that they are also made in the image of the divine. And figure out a way of communicating to them that you hear them and that you see them and that you also wish to be heard and seen. Then they go on here to talk about, so what is right action when confronted by a violent racist? Our actions are not just about our own self-preservation, but also about the well-being of those around us, including violent perpetrators. We are concerned about how our actions lead to domino effects, and we vow not to become oppressors even while being oppressed. We know that hatred does not transform hatred, only love does that. Right action at its core is love. Love in right action applies to everything we do, including our hobbies, our vocations, our work, and activism. Right action is necessary in the economic system we live in. Capitalism. And they ask, how do we do this and survive in a capitalist system? Survive as whole and spiritually integrated, non-exploitative, generous, and constructive human beings. That's a tall order. They write, you begin by examining if and how greed operates in your own life. Ouch. Capitalism can breed greed if we have the wrong view of possessing a multitude of things, they note, or having much more money than we need. Brings real security and real joy. They point to studies that have shown that the United States being rich does not make one happy and does not promote mental, emotional, and psychological security. I have been introducing my students in the class on race, class, and gender that I'm teaching this semester online at Worcester State, to the work of Richard Wilkinson, whose book, The Spirit Level, is worth the read. And there's a wonderful documentary called Dysfunctional Societies, in which Wilkinson and his co-author outline in pretty dramatic visualizations the difference between countries being thought to be successful because of the level of GDP, right? So if you place countries on a spectrum and you measure them by the level of GDP and say these are the most advanced, right, the best economies in the world, the U.S. is pretty high on the list, right? But then ask the question, let's look at the measures of social well-being and ask where these high economically performing countries exist. In the United States in particular is what I was pointing out. So you ask about health, you ask about social mobility, you ask about dominant wage, you ask about child care, you ask about access to health care, all of these things. Guess where our best, most prosperous country ends up?
37.
Farther down than that.
It got worse.
And it is because we understand this whole idea of equity, right? I love having professors precede me in the pulpit because I can just continue to point at them, right? Equity actually determines well-being. It is the single most important social indicator of human well-being, and that is, instead of us measuring ourselves by all that we have, right? If we start to measure ourselves instead by how closely we are relating to others, how closely we are aligned with those in terms of the resources that everyone has, we discover we're far more satisfied, we're far more able to recognize a sense of joy, accomplishment, and capacity. And that is more important than having the most toys. Right? I've been thinking about this in terms of the size of my library. This is really a hugely problematic meditation on my part. And I know that my wife is probably listening from the kitchen down here making soup, so I want to be very quiet. And say, I'm not going to be able to take all my books with me. And yet, right now, those are symbolic of all of the people in my life that I have surrounded myself with beyond those who are physically with me. And so they carry an importance, and at some point I'm going to need to give those important friends to others, right? Because it's not about how many books I have, it's about how many people I can honor in the reading of them that matters. They continue, some of us have come to value things that don't bring lasting joy. The symbols of success, a large home, a luxury car, precious gems and metals, the expensive designer clothing, and paying for these through doing work that exploits, maims, causes addictions, or kills others is destructive for all concerned. It feeds the delusion, they note, that being wealthy or appearing to be wealthy protects any of us, but in their case, they're talking specifically about black people, from exploitation. They note right livelihood promotes safety, truth, non-harming, and constructive enterprises. Right livelihood is not the pursuit of greed and has no interest in impressing others with material success. It is not a way to demonstrate economic viability or invulnerability. It can be used as a springboard to create economic alternatives within the system in which we find ourselves. I think that is powerfully important in this moment for us to imagine. I promise that I will need to continue this meditation because there's far more here than I'm going to have the chance to cover. But I want to move to one of the points in the book that I think is most powerfully important. And that is, they point to the words of the Black lesbian poet Audre Lorde, who says, "We believe that the act of self-preservation in the face of another's attempt to annihilate us is one of the highest forms of spiritual practice there is." We believe that the act of self-preservation in the face of another's attempt to annihilate us is one of the highest forms of spiritual practice there is, which is a way of saying, especially to those who have been told their lives don't matter, take care of yourselves. Allow yourself to do those things which contribute to your health and your well-being. I say this because it's not just African Americans, but women. Women who have been told all of their lives that their place in the world is to sacrifice themselves in service to their children, in service to their spouses, in service to the country in many points in history. And we often think, and I've heard this said by others, meditation is just such a, it's a personal thing, right? And I want to point back to us and say what you do in service to your health and well-being is an act of resistance in a world that didn't want you to survive to begin with. Your capacity for self-care also reflects an ethic of care that can be developed for others. If we learn to care for our bodies, maybe we'll learn to care for the planet. If we care for our bodies, maybe we'll learn to care for the bodies of others whose suffering we are a part of. If we care for each other, maybe we can change the world. It's not about becoming enlightened. It's about our own awakening being in service to the end of suffering for all beings. Yes? Yes. Amen. So I want to pause here and to say the good news this week is that we have heat and that we've been able to maintain that heat this week. I want to thank Dee Hudson for all of her efforts and for Maura Rouse for all of their efforts last week to bring us heat in the middle of a cold day. It was maintained throughout this week, and we had the Bengali Association of Worcester was here yesterday with about 85 to 100 people all day long. And I don't have pictures today, but Lakshmi was set up here with all of her refinement. Lakshmi is the Hindu-Buddhist goddess of knowledge and education. And I am always honored when Lakshmi makes her appearance in this sanctuary. We've been honored with Lakshmi, we've been honored with Saraswati, we've been honored with Durga, but yesterday was that. And the fact that we were able to provide a warm space for another community to come in and to worship one of the essences of their tradition, to me, is part of what grounds us as a community of faith, but also as the center of community. And that is also good news. So in service to this mission, caring for each other, providing a space not only for ourselves, but for others in our community to discover and awaken to their own integrity, we take up an offering every Sunday. And we invite you to contribute in a way that makes you feel good. No amount is described here, only the ability and capacity of each of us to do so as we so determine. If you would like to contribute digitally, you're welcome to text 508-231-5333 35. This time our morning offering will be received. So here's what we're going to do, because I apparently talk a hell of a lot longer than I am conscious of. I need to get that clock fixed on the back wall, because it's just, either that or I need to have folks in the back row like Christine hold up cards, like 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes, right? The cane, whatever. I mean, it's absurd for me to tell people like Joan McGinn, 2.5 minutes. You only have 2.5 minutes, and then I go on like that. So my apologies. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you again the response of reading as a gift for you to meditate on this week. We're going to forego the final hymn. We're going to do the benediction. We're going to forego joys and sorrows. Wait. See, understand intention before reacting, okay? Let's practice. No, here's what I'd like you to do. During the postlude, I would like you to turn to the people beside you, behind you, or in front of you that you didn't come with and share a joy or sorrow between you, all right? While we hear the postlude, but before we do the postlude, let me give you the benediction, and we'll end with music. As we leave this sacred time, may we carry with us the truths that our Black Buddhist teachers have lifted into the light. That awakening is not an escape from the world, but a deeper arrival in it. May we remember that liberation is practiced in breath and body, in community and in struggle, in the courage to face suffering without surrendering our joy. May the wisdom of these teachers, their resilience, their clarity, their fierce tenderness, guide us toward a freedom that does not float above history, but rises from within it. May we walk from this place with hearts steady and open, with compassion that does not waver, with justice that does not wait, with love that refuses to leave anyone behind. Go in peace. Go in power, go in shared work of awakening, for the path is wide, and we walk it together. Amen, and blessed be. Now. Dave. All right, now that your conversation has begun, we're going to invite you to carry that forward into coffee hour, which I believe is Soup Sunday, this Sunday. For those of you who have never been to Soup Sunday, we offer soup. The suggested donation is $5, but everyone who wants soup gets it, whether you got money or not. So I hope you will get soup. There's there should be a vegetarian or vegan option as well as a carnivorous one. I'm not certain what they are today, but we'll be pleased to find out. I want to thank Matt for his wonderful music this morning. Thank you all for being here. Are there any very, very short announcements? Yes. Come on.
So folks have mentioned that they would like to make melt the ice hats. It has come to the attention of Fiber Arts, and we have responded. We have managed to find 2 people to teach people to knit or crochet. You don't have to know how. This shows you all the different times I have been taught to knit and forgotten how. No shame. So knit or crochet Wednesday before Fiber Arts. Fiber Arts is a time we take out to do our spiritual practice of fiber arting, but teaching people is important and we want to do that too. So if you want to make those hats, we need red yarn if you've got it in your stash because it's hard to find, and your support. And
What time?
6:30 on Wednesday.
Thank you. All right.
To learn.
Anyone else? Dave.
So we've got stewardship season coming up, and in preparation for that, for the next 2 Sundays, not this week, but next week and the week after, in the classroom across from Aaron's office, we'll have a financial information session. Very brief, 10 minutes, but then we'll stay for people who have questions. It's especially geared towards newer folks in the church, but everybody's welcome to come. Thank you.
Great.
The book group with Side with Love is reading Blueprint for Revolution. We'll be meeting back there February 22nd.
All right. With that, let's eat soup.